The first time he saw her, she was standing in the rain like she was waiting for the sky to finish what the world had started. Clothes soaked through, arms locked around herself, chin lifted just enough to look stubborn instead of broken. Elias Ward had ridden down from his mountain cabin to trade pelts, not to find a stranger half-frozen on the edge of town. But there she was, rooted in the mud outside the general store, as if someone had thrown her away and she hadn't figured out where else to fall. He noticed the damage fast, the way a man does who spent years reading weather and tracks. A split lip, old bruises yellowing along one cheek, boots too big, toes clearly stuffed with rags. Her canvas bag sagged light in her grip, meaning there wasn't much in it. What struck him most wasn't her condition, but the town's. People stepped around her like she was a broken barrel. I slid off her face. No one asked, no one helped. Just that quick, guilty glance that said, "Not my problem." When he pushed open the store door, he caught the end of the argument inside. The shopkeeper's voice was sharp. "Told you, May, we're done. Your credit's no good. Your husband says you're not his concern, so you ain't mine either." Her reply was scraped thin. "I just need flour for a week. I'll work it off. Clean, stock, whatever you need." "You already worked here," the man snapped. "Look how that turned out." Silence. The kind that makes your teeth clench. Then her again, barely audible. "I'll go then." A moment later she stepped back into the rain, carrying nothing but that bag and a thin shawl that did nothing against the cold. She walked past Elias without looking up, heading for the far end of town where the road narrowed into dark trees and open country. He watched her get smaller in the gray light. One more person the town had decided to let the weather deal with. Practical sense said let her go. She was a stranger with someone else's bruises and someone else's story. He'd come down for salt, coffee, a new axe handle. Not this, but the mountains had taught him one thing. Things you leave to die in the cold don't always stay buried. Sometimes they come back and sit with you anyway, whether you recognize them or not. "Ma'am," he called. She flinched like the word itself might be followed by a blow. When she turned, he finally saw her eyes. Not empty. Worse. Full of a quiet, practiced certainty that if life hurt, it was only what she'd earned. "I don't want trouble," she said quickly. "I'll be out of your way. I just need to keep moving before dark." Elias studied her a long moment, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, fingers tightening on the strap of his pack. Every mile of the North Ridge Road unrolled in his mind, washed-out stretches, slick stone, wind that cut to bone. She wouldn't last the night out there. And if he let her go, he knew exactly whose face would be sitting across from him in the cabin later, between the stove and the shadows. "Name's Elias Ward," he said at last. "My cabin's half a day from here, up along the North Ridge. There's food, dry clothes. You look like you could use both." She shook her head before he'd even finished. "I don't deserve kindness." She didn't say it dramatic, just flat, like a rule carved into bone. He took one slow step closer, pale eyes steady on hers. "Then I'll teach you what it feels like," he said. "First lesson is simple. You're not freezing to death on my road while I'm standing here watching." May didn't speak for a long time. Rain dripped from her hair in thin, trembling lines, tracing paths down her already bruised cheek. She stood there like someone calculating risks she couldn't afford to misjudge again. Elias didn't move, didn't push. He'd learned long ago that frightened animals bolt when cornered, and people weren't much different when the fear lived deep. Finally, she swallowed, the sound small beneath the rain. "If you're lying," she whispered, "I don't have the strength to fight you." "I'm not lying," Elias replied softly. "If you were any safer walking into those woods alone, I'd let you. But you're not." He nodded toward the tree line, where fog pooled like something waiting. "You go out there tonight, the mountain takes you. Storm's coming." May followed his gaze, her breath stuttering as a gust of cold air sliced across her soaked clothes. She winced from the movement. Elias caught it. The way she held her ribs, the tightness in her jaw. Someone had put pain there, not the world, person. And whoever he was, Elias felt a familiar burn crawl up the back of his neck. "Come with me," he said quietly. "Just to the cabin. Just until you're warm and fed. After that, you choose." Her fingers tightened on the strap of her bag, knuckles white from cold and fear. "Why?" she asked, not suspicious, genuinely bewildered. Why would a stranger help me? Elias could have told her the truth, that he'd once watched someone he cared for walk away bruised and hungry and ashamed, and he hadn't been brave enough to stop her, that he'd spent years since wishing he had. But he didn't owe her the weight of that story yet. "Because you need help," he said simply. "And I'm not the kind of man who pretends he doesn't see it." She blinked, and for a heartbeat her expression cracked. Pain, disbelief, and something dangerously close to hope. Then she nodded once, tiny but decisive. "All right." Elias led his horse from the post, swinging up with practiced ease before extending his hand toward her. She hesitated, glancing at the saddle, then at him. Trust wasn't something she gave. Not anymore. But she was out of road, out of choices, out of strength. She placed her hand in his. He pulled her up gently, settling her in front of him so she wouldn't fall when exhaustion took over. And as the town shrank behind them and the mountains opened wide and dark ahead, May leaned forward just slightly. Barely a movement, but enough for Elias to feel it. She wasn't safe yet. But for the first time she wasn't alone. The trail to Elias's cabin wound upward through thick pines, their needles glistening with rain. The storm had gathered strength, wind tugging at May's wet clothes like unseen hands trying to pull her back. Elias kept one arm braced around her waist, steadying her when the horse stumbled on the slick ground. She barely reacted. Her body sagged with exhaustion, her head dipping forward every few minutes before she forced herself upright again. "You can lean," Elias murmured behind her. "You won't fall." May stiffened at the suggestion, as if the idea of relying on anyone, even for balance, was dangerous. But seconds later, when another gust hit and her strength gave out, she finally let herself rest against him. Her weight was feather-light, unnervingly so. "You haven't eaten today," Elias said quietly. She didn't answer. "Yesterday," he tried. Silence again. He exhaled, anger curling low in his gut. But not at her. At the world that let someone become this fragile without lifting a hand to help. At whoever had carved fear so deeply into her that even kindness felt threatening. By the time they reached the ridge overlooking his valley, May lifted her head slightly. The cabin came into view. A small, sturdy structure tucked beside a stream, lantern light glowing softly through the window. Her breath caught. "This is yours," she whispered. "Built it myself," Elias said. "It's quiet, safe. Hate it sometimes, but it keeps the world out." She stared at the warm light with an expression he couldn't quite read. Yearning, disbelief, and something mournful, like she was looking at a home she didn't deserve. When they reached the porch, Elias dismounted first, then helped her down with careful hands. The moment her boots hit the ground, her knees buckled. He caught her instinctively. May flinched as though expecting pain, not support. "I've got you," he said. The words were simple, but they landed heavy, like no one had ever said them to her before. Inside, the heat from the fireplace washed over them. May stopped just past the threshold, eyes darting around the cabin like she expected a trap. A simple table, a well-worn chair, shelves lined with jars, blankets neatly folded. Nothing threatening, nothing hidden. "You can sit," Elias said, pulling a chair close to the fireplace. May stayed standing. "May," he said gently, "you're safe here." Her eyes shimmered, not with trust, but with the agony of wanting to believe him. And then, in a voice cracking like thin ice, she whispered, "No place has ever been safe for me." For a moment Elias didn't move. Her words, No place has ever been safe for me. Hung in the warm air like cold smoke, refusing to fade. Outside, wind battered the shutters. Inside, May stood like someone bracing for impact, every muscle tight, ready to run even though she could barely stand. He stepped back a little, giving her space. "You're not trapped here," he said softly. "Door's right behind you. If you want to leave, you can." May blinked at the door with a strange expression, like she was checking whether it was real. Then, slowly, her shoulders loosened a fraction. Not trust, just the first breath after too long underwater. Elias moved toward the stove, kneeling to stir the pot he'd left simmering earlier. "Sit if you want. Stand if you want. But you're freezing and you need heat." The smell of stew, rich, warm, filled with herbs, spread through the cabin. May's breath hitched at the smell, almost imperceptibly, but Elias caught it. Hunger wasn't just in her stomach. It lived in her bones. After a long hesitation, she walked toward the chair by the fire. Not gracefully, more like each step was a negotiation with pain. When she lowered herself onto the chair, her whole body sighed from exhaustion. She had been fighting for hours, maybe days. Elias ladled stew into a bowl and set it on the table beside her. "Eat slow," he warned gently. "Your stomach won't know what to do with real food yet." May stared at the bowl. Steam curled upward, warming her face. Her fingers hovered above it but didn't touch. "You sure this is for me?" she asked. The question stabbed deeper than anything she'd admitted so far. "Yes," Elias said firmly. "Nobody else here to feed." She swallowed hard and finally picked up the spoon. Her first bite was tiny. Her second was almost apologetic. Then the dam broke. She ate with a quiet desperation that told Elias more than any story she could have spoken. After a few minutes, her hands began to tremble. Not from hunger now, but from emotions she'd been holding back too long. She set the spoon down, unable to take more. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't polite or practiced. It was raw, scraped from the bottom of her chest. Elias sat across from her, forearms resting on his knees. "You don't owe me anything." May shook her head. "People don't help me. They hurt me for needing help." Her voice cracked. She covered her face with both hands, shoulders curling inward. Elias didn't reach for her, didn't approach. He simply said, with a steady quiet that seemed to anchor the entire room, "Then whoever taught you that was wrong." For a long while, the only sound in the cabin was the quiet pop of firewood. May kept her face hidden in her hands, as if afraid her expression might betray too much. Elias didn't rush her. He'd lived alone long enough to know wounds like hers didn't bleed on the outside first. When she finally lowered her hands, her eyes were rimmed red but clearer, like she'd made a choice, maybe not to trust, but at least to breathe. "There's something you should know," she said, voice unsteady. "If you want me to leave after, I'll go." Elias shook his head. "Tell me after you've slept. You're exhausted." "No," she whispered, "because once I lie down, I might lose the courage to say it." That made him sit straighter. May laced her fingers together tightly, the way someone does before walking into a memory that still hurts to look at. "My husband, he's not a husband in any true sense. I was married off to him when I had no choice left. He's a man the town fears. Even the sheriff won't stand against him." Elias's jaw clenched at the implication. She continued, voice soft as the falling snow outside. "He drinks. A lot. And when people drink, sometimes they break things. Chairs, bottles, people." Her fingers absently traced a thin scar along her wrist. 3 days ago, he told me I was useless, that he should have traded me for supplies instead of marrying me. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the urge to stand, to break something, to march back down the ridge. But May wasn't finished. "I ran during one of his drunken nights. Thought maybe I could disappear in another town." She gave a humorless laugh. But news travels faster than footsteps. The storekeeper today, he didn't refuse me because he's cruel. He refused me because my husband told the town that anyone hiding me would answer to him. Ice slid into Elias's blood, not from fear, but from recognition. Men like her husband were the same in every corner of the frontier. Loud, cruel, shielded by fear, dangerous because no one stopped them early enough. May looked up at him, expression tight with dread. If he finds me, he won't take me back. He'll make an example of me, and anyone who helped me. Elias leaned forward, his voice low, steady, absolute. He won't reach this cabin. You don't know what he's capable of, she whispered. Elias met her gaze without blinking. And you don't know what I am capable of. May held his gaze as if she were trying to decide whether to believe him, or whether believing him might break her more than anything her husband had done. Kindness was dangerous for people like her. Hope even more so. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing against the cabin walls with a low, eerie hum. Elias stood and moved to check the window, scanning the darkness beyond the treeline. Sure enough, snow was falling harder now, the storm rolling in fast. He won't reach this ridge tonight, Elias said, voice calm but edged. Storm's too strong. Roads will be washed out. But soon, she whispered, fingers twisting the fabric of her skirt. Maybe. Elias didn't lie. But he'll have to climb through the mountains to reach you. And I know these slopes better than the back of my own hand. She watched him as he lit another lantern, his movements steady, unhurried. But there was a heaviness in him she hadn't noticed before. A quiet readiness. A man who had been peaceful for years, but not soft. A man who had buried violence, not forgotten it. What kind of man are you, Elias? She asked softly. He paused with the lantern still in his hand. Then he set it down and leaned his weight against the table. The kind who's done things he wasn't proud of. The kind who came up here to make sure he never had to do them again. May swallowed. And now? He looked at her with a resolve that seemed carved from the mountains themselves. Now I protect what's in front of me. Her breath trembled, as if those words hit a place inside her she'd tried to keep empty. She turned toward the fire, letting the warmth touch her face as if she needed to feel something living against her skin. Thank you, she murmured, for all of this. I know you didn't owe me anything. Elias sat across from her again, forearms resting on his knees. I'm not helping you because I owe you. I'm helping you because someone should have helped you a long time ago. May blinked hard, eyes glistening. I'm scared, she admitted. I know. He didn't soften the truth. Fear keeps you sharp, but you're not facing it alone. A sudden gust slammed against the cabin door, making May jump. Elias didn't flinch, just stood, checked the lock, and placed another log on the fire. Rest tonight, he said gently. Tomorrow, we figure out how to keep you safe. May watched him, this quiet, steady man building a wall between her and the world. And for the first time in years, safety didn't feel like a dream. Felt possible. May tried to sleep, but fear curled inside her like a fist refusing to unclench. Elias kept the lantern burning low, sitting in the chair near the door, boots still on, shoulders squared. Not tense, just ready. The storm outside hammered against the cabin roof, but inside, the air felt strangely steady, safe even. She watched him in the fire's glow, the way his eyes stayed fixed on the window, the way he listened to every shift of wind like he could separate danger from weather. You don't have to stay awake, she whispered. He didn't look away from the window. I do. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped when she saw something new in his face. Not fear, not anger, purpose. A kind she had never seen turn toward her. Hours passed. Eventually the storm slowed, and silence settled over the ridge. Too quiet. Elias stood, walked to the window, and lifted the curtain just enough to see the trail. His body shifted almost imperceptibly. "May," he said quietly. "Don't move." Her heartbeat stumbled. "Is he?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. A lantern flickered between the trees below, then another. The glow of men moving in the dark. They were climbing toward the cabin. Her stomach dropped. "Elias, I should leave. If he finds me here." Elias turned, and for the first time she saw what the mountain had shaped in him. Not a violent man, but a capable one. A man who didn't want to fight but would end one if forced. "He won't touch you," Elias said with a quiet finality that felt like steel. "Not while I'm breathing." He handed her his spare coat. "Stay here, behind the table. Don't open the door unless it's my voice." May grabbed his arm. "Elias, please don't die because of me." He held her gaze, steady as stone. "I'm not dying tonight. I'm getting you the life you should have had." Then he stepped outside into the cold, closing the door behind him. May pressed trembling hands to her mouth as muffled voices drifted up the slope, her husband's harsh bark among them. A shout, footsteps, then a crack, snow shifting, a struggle. Her breath hitched. Silence stretched long and terrifying, until finally, the door opened. Elias stood there, chest rising with heavy breaths, snow clinging to his coat. A bruise darkened his cheek, but he was standing, alive, and alone. "It's over," he said softly. May covered her mouth as tears fell, not of fear, but release. Elias stepped inside, closing the world out behind him. "You're safe now," he said. For the first time, she believed it.